Welcome to the Paper Chasers Book Club. Today we are reading Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. This book is all about leadership. It's essentially a catalog of all the mistakes that Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL commander, and his partner have made in war on the battlefield and their lessons learned for how to be a better leader. CT, Roman, I appreciate having you guys today. We met in our men's club that CT you're leading. And even there, it seems like we're trying to figure out what our endeavors are, trying to be better leaders. And so I think this is a natural connection. How are you guys today?
Good, man. Appreciate you for having us. Agree in the men's group, we're taking ownership of everything, holding each other accountable. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here, man. Thank you for having us, like CT said. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it.
Let's get it.
Yeah, and so I wanted to actually start with a conversation we had in the men's club. So I remember our first club conversation where we all met each other. We talked about, okay, this is a men's club. What does it mean to be a man? And I remember when I was reflecting on that, I had to struggle with even the question because I'm like, well, what makes a man sound synonymous with what makes a good leader? And so I'm hoping that, that in this, we kind of get an answer to what it means to be a man, which is something that we naturally ask ourselves on a weekly basis and also get out of this book.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it that way, actually. But I think a lot of the qualities of a leader are synonymous with the qualities of what makes a man. Mm-hmm. Things like setting healthy boundaries, things like holding yourself accountable, taking extreme ownership, supporting others, building others up.
Yeah, I think just being a man is like understanding that this whole life scenario is bigger than you are, you know? Like leading others and knowing that others' growth is your own growth. So I think that's what's to be a man, to lead by example.
I love that connection to others and something bigger than yourself. Because one of the qualities of a leader that's required for extreme ownership is that connection to a bigger why, kind of why you're doing this, which is really important in the military context when you even question, why are we in the military in this, they're in Ramadi in Iraq and why are we even here? Which I want to start off with that because that's a good question of why we're even doing this. Let me start with the authors, just a little bit of context. I think there's some good stuff here. So if you don't know who Jocko Willink is or Leif Babin, they're both Navy SEAL officers who served together in our Ramadi, the most dangerous and violent place in Iraq at the time they were there. So they have hands-on experience with war. What's really cool about this book, and I think what makes it a unique capture in time, is they say that after the Vietnam War in the 1900s, there was a period of dry years where combat leaders' lessons faded. Then the Iraq and Afghanistan wars gave birth to a new generation of leaders. So they said that these leaders were not forged in the classrooms through hypothetical training and theory, but through practical hands-on experience on the front lines of war. So I appreciate the hands-onness. So this isn't a book of theory. And also, I'll just say, when I hear anything from the Navy SEALs, I listen because, they have to go through Hell Week, which is training, basically some of the hardest training in the world. I mean, you don't sleep for the entire week. You get in cold water. You're in cold water the entire time on the ocean. Tiger Woods, actually, so one of the most gifted athletes of our time, recently broke both of his knees jumping out of an airplane trying to become a Navy SEAL.
Wait, what? Oh shit! Tiger Woods wanted to be a Navy SEAL?
Yes.
Career change.
I heard it from Ryan Holiday, who has his own podcast with a dope book background setup, but he was using that example as a lesson for some people just always want more, and you need to learn to just accept, that like when is enough in life. So that's what he was using the example for, like, Tiger Woods needed to calm down. But it does speak to, how hard the training is and how awesome it is to be a Navy SEAL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took, seeing these stories, I think when you hear, oh, I was a Navy SEAL, you're like, okay, don't really know exactly what that means, don't know what you did. Hearing these stories, it's like, well, one, I'm like, y'all killed a lot of motherfuckers. Like, you guys shot a lot of motherfuckers. And like in every story, it was like the enemy started shooting at us.
And we just rained on them. Yeah, we're laughing.
Yeah, exactly. With lethal accuracy. And just hearing all these stories, man, the things they went through, it really gave me a lot of appreciation and respect. for these guys.
Yeah, like CT said, it's just I've always known about like Navy SEALs, Marines growing up and
Yeah.
being in the army, but I don't really know what like it takes to be there, you know, like what they do and everything. So just the intense training, it's like I really respect them for all that, and it really is mind over matter at that point, you know, like your body can withstand so much more than we think we're capable of. It's crazy.
They say it's a mindset thing in the book. This book gives a great explanation of what Navy SEALs are. So the way the book's laid out is, first off, it has pictures all throughout the book, which I love. I love myself a good, skip some of the pages with some pictures, get through that a little bit. And they're great. It's like real exclusive pictures. And then, so each chapter is a lesson learned. So like I said, it's an after-action review of all the mistakes they've made. So they start each chapter with a story, and then they go through the principle of the lesson learned, and then they have a final section on business, and so how it relates to the business world, which makes it applicable to anyone reading it. So you don't have to be a Navy SEAL to get the lessons learned out of this. So that's how each chapter is laid out. Another cool thing in the book is they have footnotes at the bottom of each page. So for example, they will go through all the military jargon. So right in the beginning, they say like a Humvee, for example, which I always thought was just a big like Hummer, that's used for war, stands for high mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle. So there's a footnotes throughout there. So yeah, if you want to learn about the Navy SEALs, and honestly, I was thinking like, I can't believe they're exposing a lot of this stuff. I'm like, what if this book gets in the wrong hands?
Yes.
Which speaks to how powerful I think it is.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was like, I was imagining like some foreign government being like, oh, this is how they train. Oh, like, oh, this is the exact scenarios they went through in training, and this is how they operate. Like they were kind of revealing tactics. Like we always put snipers on the high ground.
Yeah.
We always, cover and move kind of thing. I was like, that's very
Yeah.
it's
It's
very
like, yeah.
revealing.
Enemies like, they're not going to get away with that twice.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you're
Oh,
gonna
they
put
put
it out
snipers
there.
on the high ground.
Roman, you started off with one part of a leader being understanding it's something bigger than yourself. And the way I think the author describes that is understanding the why. One thing I want to start off with in the book is actually in the introduction. There's a solid 15, 20 pages of the introduction, which I thought which basically just talks about how effective the book is. I'm someone who usually likes to jump right into, okay, what makes it effective? So if you're like me, you can maybe skip there. But there is one part I want to talk about in the introduction, which they address head on. I'll just read the quote. We hope to dispel the myth that the military leadership is easy because subordinates robotically and blindly follow orders. On the contrary, U.S. military personnel are smart, creative, free-thinking individual human beings. They must believe in the cause for which they are fighting. The SEAL teams where innovation and input from everyone is encouraged. And so they get more into why exactly they were into the war, but I think that's an important aspect to say that I also kind of had the understanding that, man, those Navy SEALs, those Army, they're risking their lives for what? At the end of the day, they may lose their lives for, are they a government pawn? And I think they addressed that pretty well. Did you guys have a similar understanding or a similar kind of conception of, man, these guys are willing to throw their lives away for what? And if so, did this book give you any more context as to why they're doing that and if it's worth it? And maybe your mind hasn't changed. Maybe you still sit there, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I've always kind of thought about that in regards to the military. Like, why exactly would someone feel compelled to put their life on the line? Like in the story, they gave an example of an Iraqi soldier getting shot in the street and two Navy SEALs running out into gunfire to pull him. It's like, it's kind of their team member, but it's not like one of their brothers that they trained with. And they could easily justify it as like, oh, he's not even my nationality. He's not even really in my team. Like, fuck it, he got shot. I'm gonna not get shot,
Yeah.
But they still ran out into gunfire and pulled him into safety. And so, yeah, that really drove the point home that it's like, oh no, they really believe in what they're doing. Like they really do. And you can tell in the authors' voices as well. Like anytime they tell a story, they're like, we were doing this to save more lives. We were doing this to bring our brothers home safely. We were doing this to further the strategic objective. So it's like, yeah, they really believe in the why. And I think you have to. Like as soon as guns start going off, if you don't believe in the why, you're gone.
Yeah, and I know even Jocko talks about sometimes not understanding that why, and he's like, I will not brief my boys until I understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty good lesson too, about having to put himself in his leadership shoes and say, okay, they don't want us to die, they want us to win the objective. So why are they doing this?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, just asking the why. I feel like, you know, it's much more important than the how. A lot of us get caught up in how we're gonna get through this, but it's like, why are we gonna get through this? So I do understand why they're doing it, but I personally don't think I'd be able to be in that situation myself.
Sure.
Like, maybe if it was for like a loved one, yeah, maybe that sounds a little selfish, but I don't know. I just like,
That makes sense too. That makes so much sense.
I don't know. I've always never understood why people go into the military, but I respect it, and I kind of do like understand where they're coming from. Maybe they have a military background, their families, or know someone that died in war, so that's probably why they wanted to follow in those footsteps. So for me personally, I don't have an experience tied down with that to do it.
Yeah, you're making me think. So Roman, when I think of you, I think of very in tune, a very great understanding of what spirituality means to you. And that actually connects, for me, the understanding of their why. So what I understood kind of their why was, there's this country, really violent place in Iraq, Ramadi, and the people there were savages. Jocko says that he only saves the word savages for people that are doing the worst things a human can do. And they talk about trying to stop that, trying to save the civilians there. What I thought was interesting, Roman, is you said that, you know, you personally couldn't find a why to do that because it's not your family. I just want to reflect on a learning that I've had. So there was, to me, from my knowledge, the best study that we have for spirituality in the afterlife is this scientist who worked with hundreds of people who had near-death experiences. And they would try to find themes among them of how they differed after they had this near-death experience, after they reported being dead and coming back to life. And one of the top commonalities is that they no longer, rather, their relationships were broken between their family, because these people would now risk their lives to save other people's lives. So the example they used were, if they were driving on the highway and someone's car would set on fire and they were driving with their family, they would pull over, put their whole family in risk, or rather put themselves at risk, just to save the guy who's like stuck in the car on fire. And the family's like, you're a father to these kids. And the guy is like, it's another human being, it's another soul. I'm going to try to save that at any cost. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed like these people who at least had near-death experiences, maybe really in tune with spirituality, were willing to risk their life to save anyone else's, because they valued all life equally. And so maybe that's kind of how the Navy SEALs are able to put their lives for others. I'm not sure, but
I respect that. And I mean, I hope eventually one day I can get to that level. You know? Like, I want to be able to become, instead of being selfish, I want to be selfless. You know, I want to be able to.
It's almost like a complete loss of ego, which they do talk about ego really holding you back as being a good leader. Now, I'm not here to say that ego is a completely bad thing. I don't know where that balance is for ego or not, but that may be that mediating factor.
Yeah, that makes sense though. Like if you have almost died, which I'm sure most of those guys in Ramadi have, you know, they're getting shot at almost every day. So they've almost all had near-death experiences. And so, yeah, if that's the case, where typically when someone almost dies, they lose their fear of death. Yeah. And they feel more selfless to save others. Maybe, yeah. Like those two guys that ran out into the street to save the Iraqi soldier, they're like, fuck it. If we die, whatever, but we got to save this guy.
Yeah. I'm going to get to that exact story, actually. That's in chapter 3, where it says believe. The chapter is called believe. So each chapter in the book is on the lesson that you need to have as a leader. Chapter 3 is believe and believing the mission, and it goes to exactly that story. All right, so we're going to jump right into chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Extreme Ownership, title of the book, talking about how a leader needs extreme ownership. Jocko starts off with the worst situation in the Navy SEALs. What he says is the worst situation is what's called a blue on blue. It's the worst scenario in the military. Here's some context. So Jocko is in the middle of war. I mean, it's wartime. Bullets are flying. They're in the most dangerous part in Iraq, in Ramadi. And they are starting to get beat down a little bit. And they're caught off guard because the enemy is really picking things up. And so Jocko, he's calling in a tank and he's about to call in a bomb strike. And so he's like, hey, we need air support here. We're going to drop some bombs. But he has this bad gut feeling. And he's about to call the bomb strike on the house. And then he realizes that it was a blue on blue, meaning that it was other Navy SEALs and they didn't coordinate correctly. And he almost called the bomb strike on his own guys. And to understand the severity of this, I mean, he talks about how there were other Navy SEAL squads or platoons, and they were, you instantly get kicked out of the Navy SEALs in the past, people instantly get kicked out. The name of your squad is now banned, so it's almost like, it's passed down for generations as, we would never use this name. And so it's the most horrible fate. And so Jocko ends up realizing before he calls the bomb strike, he listens to his gut, he double-checked his coordinates, and they don't call the bomb strike, but there was gunfight back and forth, and one of the guys in the building ended up getting shot in the face. One of their own Navy SEALs got shot in the face, and the Navy SEALs and the Iraqi army actually worked together in this to defeat. Can't remember the name of the enemy. Was
Insurgents?
it the insurgents?
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was some terrorist group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I can't remember the name exactly, but one of their allies ended up dying. So they lost one life of one of the Iraqi armies, and the other guy got shot in the face. So he talks about, everything else went smoothly, but that happened. And so he gets back to the mission, they're doing the mission debrief, and emails are flooding his inbox. I mean, he said his inbox is full, and people are like, you had a blue on blue, what the hell? And he also got shut down. So from their commanding officer said, shut down, conduct no more operations. Jocko then has to own up to what he did. So basically the commanding officers, everyone's coming in and say there's a blue on blue. Like, this is the worst thing that could happen. And Jocko is like, I basically lost my job. Even though we had all these even though the mission was successful, I'm going to get kicked out of the SEALs. And so there's this scene where all the commanding officers are in the room, and he has to give a presentation on what happened. And he talks about, in preparing for the presentation, he has all these slides on exactly what happened, because there were a lot of moving parts. Like, there were a lot of different points of failure that led to that. Like, there was one commander who should have done this, and there was another sniper who should have said these coordinates that could have prevented it. And he's doing this, and he's like, there's something wrong with this presentation. And he's like, what's wrong is I'm not taking ownership as the leader for this operation. And so here's the scene where he has to present to everyone. I thought it was really tense. So he says, a few minutes later, I walked into the platoon space where everyone was gathered to debrief. The silence was deafening. The commanding officer sat in the front row. The CMC stood ominously in the back. The SEAL that had been wounded, fragged in the face by a .50 caliber round, was there, his face bandaged up. I stood before the group. Whose fault is this? I asked to the room full of teammates. After a few moments of silence, the SEALs who had mistakenly engaged the Iraqi shoulder spoke up. It was my fault. I should have positively identified my target. No, I responded. It wasn't your fault. Whose fault is it? I asked the group again. It was my fault, said the radio man. I should have passed on the position sooner. Wrong. It wasn't your fault. Whose fault of it? It's my fault, said another SEAL. I should have controlled the Iraqis and made sure they stayed in their sector. Negative. I said, you are not to blame. More of my SEALs were ready to explain what they had done wrong and how we had failed. But I'd heard enough. You know whose fault it is? You know who gets all the blame for this? The entire group sat there in silence, including the commanding officer and the investigating officer. No doubt they were wondering whom I would hold responsible. Finally, I took a deep breath and said, there is only one person to blame for this. Me. That's Jocko's first example of extreme ownership. So he says, despite the tremendous blow to my reputation and to my ego, it was the right thing to do. Looking back, it was clear that despite what happened, the full ownership I took of the situation actually increased my trust from the commanding officer. If I had tried to pass the blame to others, I would have been fired. We vowed to never let it happen again. The leader is truly and ultimately responsible for everything. The most intense situation, blue on blue, and Jocko actually uses it as a situation to get more trust in him as a leader by taking extreme ownership.
Yeah, it's so applicable to so many situations. Like, it could be something as simple as, let's say you break something in like someone else's house. Do you tell them? Do you take ownership, or do you just sweep it under the rug and go, maybe they'll just think it dropped? Or even like countless times I can think about.
Like
in
that
work.
happened. That happened.
That's definitely happened to me. That's definitely happened to me. Maybe yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, the other day.
That's tough, man.
But countless times, like in work, right? Too, like, how many times have you made a mistake on like some report, or you were supposed to do something and you forgot, or yeah, something you were giving a presentation and all of a sudden you see that you made a mistake in the presentation. I think it's very tempting to try to just hide those mistakes, but as the point was made there in Jocko's story, it's always better to just have integrity, and people respect you more. They don't think you're broken or fucked up. They just think you're a human and you make mistakes. And the fact that you're taking ownership of that mistakes is very commendable, very respectable. So yeah, that's something I'm really trying to incorporate. It's like anytime I make a mistake, no matter what it is, own up to it, take ownership.
Yeah, the same scenarios. Like I've had scenarios at work where it's like I fuck up, and you're working with the team, like one mess up in the orders like throws us all off, but it's still, you gotta take that ownership of it and like, okay, I messed up and I'm gonna redo it right now. I learned from it and let's go again, like take those mistakes with you, but learn from them and let them go, because I feel like a lot of us get caught in our own mistakes and then we just keep repeating them because we allow it to define us sometimes, but you just gotta learn to understand that we're always gonna make mistakes, and that you can just learn to let them go and keep going on in life,
Yeah, I mean, ever since I've read this book, this extreme ownership principle, I think to me has been really easy to understand, at least, so I know how to apply it. And it's something that it is different than what you would normally think of. So I've been trying it. I would say that's probably the biggest effect this book has had on my life since reading that chapter, was trying to do extreme ownership, whether for me, it's been in a relationship where if they're upset at something and I'm like, it's not really on me, I'll just be like, I'll try to take ownership for that. Or the other day, actually, I was with my boss and she called me into a meeting and everything went super smooth. Like I could have ended the meeting and been like, oh, meeting's great. But I realized that I forgot to set up a meeting that we were supposed to have. It wasn't time sensitive, but I just said I would do it and I didn't do it. And so I was like, hey, actually, one more thing. I just want to talk about, actually, I made a mistake. I messed up. I forgot to set this meeting. I said I would, and I didn't. And I didn't have to say that, but I felt like it was respected from my leader for me to call myself out on that small mistake. And I do feel like it was received well, and she has more trust in me. So I've been able to apply it a little bit more, but it's been working well. I feel like you have to have a safe space to really be able to admit your mistakes. But if you trust the person that they're not going to just try to push you down if you admit your mistakes, I think it'll be for the better. I think it'll be good. So
yeah, I think that gives an entirely different perspective or perception from your boss. Like when you did that, what you did, you said, hey, I made a mistake. I should have done this. And you didn't even have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you could have easily just avoided that. She probably respected that way more than the perception if you guys met, everything went smoothly, and then an hour later you set up the meeting.
Yeah.
And she sees it come across and she goes, this guy just remembered the meeting because we met and then he forgot to do it, so now he's doing it. Like that's not really, that's like,
there's like integrity in
Right.
doing that.
So I think you did the right thing.
Yeah, like tying back to what you said about like being in a safe place, like I feel like the hardest part is when you're not in a safe place, like you still have to own up to it, even when you're not comfortable doing it in front of those people you don't feel safe with, like in the as John said, I bet he was scared shitless, like going into the group meeting with all those high-ranking lieutenants and commanders and everything. It's like that's not necessarily a safe place. Like, yeah, you guys are like maybe boys and everything, but like they're still at that rank. Like they have to set those standards, and so like you still have to find that integrity in yourself to say the truth even when it's not necessarily in front of the safest group.
That's a great point. You almost have to not care how it's going to be received. Just feel good knowing you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, the only thing you control is your thoughts and your emotions, and you can't control the outcome of it. So to just go in there, regardless of the outcome, still do the right thing.
So that was the story part of the extreme ownership. So then they go into business and they give an example in business. And there was just one part I wanted to pull out of their business example here. So one thing that I really picked up on in this book is how good Jocko is at coming into these organizations who they don't know too. I mean, they know about he's a Navy SEAL, but they know that he's kind of far removed from the actual business practices. But how good he is at still being able to influence these CEOs and executive leaders on changing their business. And specifically, he'll be bringing in these lessons like at a high level, and people will always minimize what he's saying or laugh at it. But he's really good at like being smooth with it, having his own smile and like rolling with the punches and being like, okay, yeah, that's funny, but here's the point and here's why it's important. It's admirable because sometimes I'll try to take the lessons, like I'm sure I'll take the lessons that I've learned from this book and try to tell friends and family. But if you don't have that delivery right on making them feel it, they can just blow it off. Like, yeah, that's cool, but you don't really understand the situation. And Jocko does a great job at being like, I don't care what the situation is. It's still applicable here, and you still have, and you know, it would still fix the problem. And so in this example, he's telling the leader, and he's making the leader repeat back to him, like, you have to have extreme ownership, and that's why he's unsuccessful. Jocko says, that's the problem. You're saying it, because he's repeating back what Jocko said. He's like, you're saying it, but I'm not convinced you believe it, which I thought was great dialogue for kind of a follow-up for if someone's really not believing it. It's like, you're saying it, but I really don't feel like you believed it. I've actually used that recently when someone like understands me, but I get this kind of feeling that they're not 100% sold.
I think that gets to a recurring theme throughout the book, which maybe they didn't say explicitly, but like this confidence and this sense of calm that leaders possess. It's like whether they're on the battlefield in a gunfight and the lieutenant is like very calmly speaking into the radio. It's like, hey, there's our target, hit him, like real calm.
Yeah.
Or whether he's in like a boardroom with some big CEO kind of people, and he's like, you know, they might laugh and make a joke and not really believe what he's saying. And he's like, yeah, like I'm gonna get him though. You know, so this sense of like super confidence in yourself and what you're conveying, and as well as like just being calm under tense situations.
Well, yeah, that goes back to like the chapter belief. You know, it's like if you yourself don't believe it, your team is gonna feel that energy out there. You know, so regardless of what you're saying, if you're not in that 100% commitment, where you don't have your doubts and everything, then you know it's gonna go smoothly because you believe it yourself. But if you don't, then it's just gonna stray away.
Yeah, like I think people can sense when someone's presenting something, whether it's you in a business meeting or it's you telling your friend something. People can kind of sense when you don't even believe in it.
Yeah.
Like you're willing to fold at the slightest pushback. You know, like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you guys are right. Like I think humans are really adept at being able to perceive that. Like, does the leader believe in what he's saying?
That's a great point. And even when it comes to like this podcast, it's like if I'm not genuinely interested in if I'm doing this because I think other people would find this interesting,
Yeah.
people are gonna pick up that like Kenny's burning energy right now. Like this is killing him, and that's gonna burn their energy. And that principle of like you should like when it comes to what you're gonna present, what you're gonna say, never do things for other people. Start with like a sample size of yourself. Like if you can picture yourself in an auditorium, you're presenting on stage, and in every single seat is you, like it's just you in every seat. Like how would they be reacting? And if you start with that, like you at least know how you would feel, what you say is going to be interesting, and if you believe in it. And that's been a principle that I've used, whether it's presentations, whether it's what I'm saying today. It's like, bro, if I don't find it interesting, like even going through some of these notes, I mean, I have what I'll be talking about. It's like some of these things I'm like, this is like, it was just like, this is a good lesson, but this isn't the most exciting story, you know? So
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard of that. Like, picture yourself as the audience.
yes, at least get the audience of one right before you
Right.
try to say, oh, you know, yeah. Because some people will be like, oh, I'm going to start this business for, you know, mothers in their 30s because there's a need in the market, and it's like some young 20-year-old dude. It's like, bro,
Right.
you know nothing about them. Like, start something for yourself. you know,
Yeah.
to be most impactful.
True.
We're gonna go to chapter 2. The lesson and the chapter title is "No Bad Teams, Only Bad Leaders," and they use a great example of Hell Week being in BUDS, which is basic underwater demolition SEAL training. And they set the scene where they have these boat crews. Hell Week takes place on the ocean. I can't remember what ocean, but regardless, they're on the ocean, cold water, no one slept. And kind of here's the scene. So they said out on the Pacific Ocean, the boat crews paddled their boats through powerful crashing waves, often capsizing and scattering wet students and paddles across the beach like storied shipwreck. The damned rubber boats were the source of a great deal of misery for these men assigned to them. Each boat had a Roman numeral painted in bright yellow on the front, indicating the boat crew number. All except the boat crew made up of the shortest men in the class, known as the Smurf crew. I feel like I'm part of the Smurf crew. Anyway, they had a bright blue Smurf painted on the bow of their boat. In each boat crew, the senior ranking man served as the boat crew leader for receiving orders and from instructors and briefing, directing, and leading the other 6 members of the boat crew. The boat crew leader bore the responsibility for the performance of the boat crew. And while each member of the boat crew had to perform, the boat crew leader, by his very position as leader, received the most scrutiny from the instructor staff. And so what happens is, and they just say how it's so crucial not to get wet and cold so they have these races. So they pit all the crews against each other and they have races. And they say if you win, you're able to sit out on the next race. And that's like the best thing when you haven't slept and just to have a few seconds of rest. And so how this plays out is there's one boat crew that's just dominating the rest. And then there's one boat crew that is getting last place every single time. So they're doing rounds of these relay races, and there's one that's always performing, one that's always doing bad. And by the way, this chapter is written by Leif Babin, and what he does is he's like, I want to try something. So he takes the leader from the winning boat crew and pairs it with the losing boat crew, so the other 5 men, and then he takes the losing boat crew leader and puts it with the winning team to see what happens. And that losing boat crew leader, he gives some dialogue in here, how the losing boat crew leader is like, it's just my guys, they're just not motivated. I'm just given a bad boat crew. And so when he finally gets put to the winning boat crew, he's like, oh, great, now I have the best guys, we're gonna win. Mm-hmm. And how it plays out is it's so interesting. He says that the race, it's neck and neck between 2 boats the entire time, and then one boat wins by like an inch. And what happened is it was the losing boat crew. It was the same 2 boat crews, but the previous losing boat crew that has lost every time with the new leader, they won by an inch. And that losing, and then the old team that used to win, they still did great, but they just lost with a good leader. And the example there is just the point they were making in the book is if you have a good leader, even for a little bit, it has ripple effects on the team. So now that team is able to pick up on what it takes to perform well. In the example of the boat crew, they actually said what made a good leader when you have a boat race, and that was specifically focus on these short spurts of movement and just encourage everyone to do the best they can to get from point A to point B, rather than telling the team like we got to win this whole thing, all of that. Like let's just focus on getting to the other end of the shore first. Mm-hmm. So that's what made the good leader in that example. Y'all have any reflections on that story?
Yeah, so I worked for this company. I won't name the company, but I remember one of the managers back in Cali. He really inspired me and my coworkers to like perform our best, to leave the bullshit outside, and to when you come into work that, it's about attitude. 51% attitude, 49% skill. So everything in this world is attitude, as long as your attitude's right, the facts don't count. So like, I remember he would motivate us and like, the team would work together great and everything. And then when I moved out here to Texas and I started with the new restaurant, we actually had 7 managers come in and leave within the 7-month period that we opened. Like we had a new manager every single month. And so
7 managers in 7 months.
And that just goes to show like the leadership skills. Like they would all fail. They were all failing. The company wasn't doing that great. And it just goes to show that it all comes down to the leader. If you can inspire your people, then they're not going to be on board with the same mission, Like I wasn't even coming for the check anymore back in Cali. I was like, damn, I love this work. It's fun. We're working as a team and everything.
Wow.
But then out here, it's like, I would dread it, It's like, just coming in for the check,
Yeah.
So that just goes to show how much a leader can influence you.
Well, I'm curious, what was it about the manager in California that made you, because like to show up to work not even for the money, just for like
In the restaurant industry, on top of that.
the enjoyment. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would just believe in me before I even believed in myself, you know. So I necessarily, when I started in cooking, I wasn't necessarily the fastest one, and you know, in the restaurant industry, you got pressure, you need to work quickly and everything, and everyone, all my coworkers would like talk down on me behind my back at first when I first started, and he knew that, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he would just inspire me. He's like, don't worry about them. Like, you just focus on the sandwich. You keep like focusing on bettering your skill, and watch with time you will. And he was right. With time, and just having that belief in me like motivated me. I'm like, I have to live up to that potential. He sees it in me, so it's in me, you know. And so I remember just over time, I kept up with all my coworkers, and they started showing a little more respect to myself. And I was like, damn. Like,
Wow.
and I told him this. I was like, yo, I really appreciate you, and like, you're one of the best managers I've ever had. Like,
Wow.
you've changed me, so I'm thankful.
That's huge.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, working for a good leader will make you want to just be there just because you're bettering yourself as a person. You know, I'll say where I currently work, it took me a while to appreciate it. Just, I've had different jobs. With some of the jobs, I didn't appreciate the work itself, but the people are so good. Every single person at where I'm working is where I want to be in like 5 to 10 years. Like, I'm the bottom of the barrel. And so, and they're all just good leaders. They're very authentic. And so I'm happy to show up because of the people, not even the job. If you just surround yourself with a great community, you're gonna better yourself in all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
So I resonate with that, Roman. There was one really hard topic covered in this same chapter, talking about in these boat crews or during Hell Week, you would get a really close connection with someone, but then they would start to underperform, and you would try to cover them in training, even though they're not performing to the standard that the SEALs want. And then the book goes on for the next couple of pages about how, like, the smallest things in the military count. So if you underperform, that can cost someone's life. There's a Navy SEAL, Marcus Luttrell. He's the movie Lone Survivor is based off of him, but he talks about how he is never late. He learned that lesson early on, but you know, if he's late and he has this habit of being late, then when it comes to being in the SEALs, if he's late to a briefing session before a mission, and he doesn't understand the route and he takes a left and he's supposed to take a right, that can cost him one of his brother's lives. And now he has to explain to his family that, oh, because I was late watching TV, that was more important than your friend's life. And so it just goes to show how they really have to be on your A game. And in this chapter talking about Hell Week, they say that some of that loyalty, some of their brothers was misguided because it really comes to the concept that, and they talk about this later when it comes to the qualities of a leader, but the man can't be more important than the mission. And so you can't have this false loyalty because if someone's not meeting the standards, it can cost everyone's life, which I thought was, just interesting, having this loyalty, but to a certain point. So you have to put the mission in front of that. I will go to chapter 3. So chapter 3, the lesson is belief. And this is the story of the SEALs learning that they have to work with the Iraqi army. This chapter is written by Jocko, and he has to tell his team that we're going to be working with these soldiers who can't even do jumping jacks and have turned on the military and have even, shot at us. And so he has to convince his team. And the lesson in this chapter is called belief, and it's believing that higher mission. And so what Jocko says is that first he doesn't get it himself. First he's furious, but then he realizes that to get any mission that they're going to do approved, the commanding officer wants to see them do it with the Iraqi army. And so he says, okay, rather than just saying, these guys don't get it, they're not here on the ground with us, they don't really know what we're going through, this is just something from corporate just from the higher ups. He says, why are they doing this? And he comes to his own realization that once they leave Iraq, the army's going to be on their own, and so they have to upskill the army so that the Navy SEALs aren't permanently stuck in Ramadi. Always do. So really the goal is to upskill them so that they can one day leave this mission and roll off defending the community.
Yeah, just seeing the bigger picture in it.
Seeing the bigger picture. And so he tells his team what's going on. And, you know, one principle that Jocko says in delivering news is to never sugarcoat anything. He says exactly how it is. So he'll be, okay, guys, this is what's going on. He says, you know, we have to work with the Iraqi army. And I love how he frames his messaging. So he's very empathetic to the team. He says, he says what the team is thinking and how he delivers the message. Told the team, why make it even harder by forcing us to fight alongside the Iraqi army? And everyone's like, damn right. And everyone's nodding. And then he says, like you, I understand that no matter how much we train, the Iraqi army will never come close to achieving the standards we set to ourselves. But we don't have to. And then he tells them why they're doing it, to upskill the army. And he says, you know, everyone in the room was quiet. They understood the why. And he said they didn't have to jump for joy for the how, but they do have to understand the why. The most important question has been answered, the why. And once they understood why, they would commit to the mission. And he says not everyone was convinced immediately. We had to keep reinforcing that. Question for you guys. Do you guys have any reflections on either on that story or just the importance of understanding the why in your mission?
Yeah, the why will always be more important, but it's like right now an example for me in my own personal life is, you know, coming out to Houston, I kind of like slacked off a little bit compared to when I was in Cali, like because I was on my own, you know, I was like finding myself a little more, but I also like derailed a little bit because I didn't have my family. Like I've always been so used to having my family with me and having their support. And when I didn't have any of that, I kind of like, I realized how much I slacked off a little. But then coming to the realization that I'm getting older, but so are my whole family, you know, everyone in my family is getting older. So it just realizing that my little sister's turning 15, I'm like, why am I even here? And the reason I came out here was to find myself and hopefully come back a better man. And I feel like finally I'm starting to do that. I finally feel that I found a why that's bigger than myself. And that's my little sister and my little niece, you know? It's my whole family.
Yeah.
But these two people specifically, like I put a picture as my wallpaper. I like have it in my room to remind me why am I getting up this morning even when I don't want to, you know? It's like, because this is bigger than me. That's my why. So finding your why will definitely
you finding your why got you to move out of Cali to Houston, which is, oh man, you know, you're definitely giving a little bit of a weather trade-off. And yeah, I will say, I just have to note, like on the other side of the camera, there's a window, and there, I don't know if you can see from there, but there's like horses. There's a couple of horses right there. But that's throwing me off. It's like being from Chicago down to, like, we grew up in the city. I'm not used to seeing horses. So yeah, man, we're here. We're in Houston.
We're in Texas.
We are here. We are
H-Town, baby.
We are
It's-
in H-Town.
And mind you, we're downtown Houston. Like we are not in the
Houston.
country.
And there's still a horse.
There's a
outside the-
skyline right there, and there's 3 horses right there.
Yeah.
Welcome to Texas.
So welcome to Texas. Yeah, I can resonate with your why, Roman. I mean, I think that's why I wake up every morning. Like, man, what I'm doing, you know, currently I'm in HR, I'm doing this podcast. It's like, it's not easy to understand exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just making myself a better person, and I'm trying to have a better impact. So, I mean, the why is why I get up every single morning, of the why of doing something bigger than yourself. I don't even necessarily know what that is yet, but yeah, thinking outside of myself, man, it just makes me so happy that I'm not like super narcissistic or just like only care about what I look like. I mean, you know, I'd love to be dripped out, but you know, if there wasn't something a step further than that, I think I've been able to, you know, have a feeling of why I'm doing things a step further than that, which I'm just so grateful for, because life seems a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, connecting to your purpose.
Yeah, I feel like
why.
a lot of people don't even know why they're doing what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Why do I go to work? Like, why do I wake up? Like, why do I try to dress up and try to impress people that I don't even care what they think about, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like people are just unconscious and living day by day, not realizing what their bigger picture is.
You have to have that spirituality at work. I'm curious for you, Roman, because like you said, like, you understood the why when it comes to even making a sandwich. And this, you know, that could seem so, oh, it's just making a sandwich, but how do you show up to work and have that bigger why when it comes to the restaurant industry? I'm curious.
The why is like people come in for an experience, and I may not be the one eating it, but I'm definitely the one making it, and people feel the energy. So I try to put as much intention of love and care. Like everything I tell people, it's like gotta make the sandwich with love, with passion. It's like even if you're just working a minimum job, it's like you can always put your love and good intention into anything you do.
Yeah, I think that charges up your life. Like that's one of the rules I try to live by. I don't always, but do everything that I do with energy, with passion, rather than like anything. Brush my teeth, like do the dishes, work out, interact with people with passion. So that's great.
Exactly.
That's you.
Yeah, I feel like meditation has helped me a lot more with that because it keeps you present, in the moment. And so, like you said, you gotta meditate in everything you do. When you're brushing your teeth, when you're driving, when you're combing your hair, when you're talking to yourself, when you're talking to people, you gotta make them your main focus with intention and everything.
I love that. Yeah, just knowing you're having that positive impact for every person's experience. It's true, man. If you're having a bad day, all you're looking forward to is that meal that is coming. Like a lot of people when they go out to eat, it's like, man, I just don't feel like cooking today. I just need some good food. And man, there is nothing more disappointing when the food does not hit like you thought it was going to hit. And that thing was just like mediocre or in some cases bad, man. That gets you food poisoning. So thank you for saying that. I don't want to underestimate the importance of a good meal. That is one of the things that makes life worth living. So
like I didn't really understand that concept, you are what you eat, until like recently. You really are. Like I feel everything in my body now. Like just being so in tune with my body. Like I grew up eating candy so much, coffee every morning, young age, sodas, all that, and now it's like I can't even do that anymore. Like having one cup of coffee makes me feel so jittery inside. I feel it in my body, and I don't like it. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So are you off coffee?
So I mean, I'll take it like then and there if I feel like it, but it's not like I need it every morning or like or I know there's alternatives for like coffee, so it's not like I'm necessarily coffee is bad. All coffee is bad. Like there are good ones, but just like Starbucks and all that, like
That's
on a daily basis, frappuccinos, all that. Oof.
Yeah, that can't
like
be good.
just thinking about it, I feel it in my body already.
I actually just picked up this mushroom coffee that, oh my God, bro. Roman, you showed me water tree. Dude, I now have two. So I went to Roman's house and I dropped them off. He has this big 5-gallon jug of water with this cool machine that bro, shoots the water out. And I'm like this. I feel like if I have this, it'd make me drink more water. So I took his recommendation. I go to this place, Water Tree, and it's like this like Eastern healing, like. Bro, I walk in and everyone is so hyped about the water, bro. It's like pH balanced water.
Alkaline water.
Everyone's like, drink the water, get the membership, bro. I'm like, dude, what is in this water, bro? But I've been doing it. Now I have 2 5-gallon chugs. I go to Water Tree. I love the people there. And the reason I bring that up is because it was there. They sold me this mushroom coffee that I have because they're more on like things that are healthier for you.
Is it mud water?
It's not that. Is that a brand?
It's
not that brand. I've seen that. It's something a little bit different. It's probably a similar concept. I actually haven't drinking it yet because I don't drink coffee ever unless I drink coffee socially. So, but I had it. Yeah, right. Yeah, I should have. That would have been but So thank you for putting me on, bro. And shout out Water Tree, alkaline water, man.
They need to sponsor the podcast, man. Water Tree. Shout out to our sponsor.
Yeah, I literally have the bumper sticker on my car right now. So
I'm so hyped on. I just got this. It's like, bro, like I broke my other one. And this keeps me accountable.
Is that a gallon? Well,
how it's 100 ounces. So you gotta drink like half of your body weight of water. Okay. So I really feel like it's made a difference, and just forget how magical water is. Like you're 70% water, man. Like, Earth is 70% water. It's like, and I talk into the water, and I know it sounds crazy, but it's just like your words have a vibration to it, and that water picks it up. So whatever you're putting into your water, like I say thank you, I'm like, I'm powerful, I'm strong. And
I like
you drink that shit, your body absorbs it, your cells absorb it, and that's what you become. So that's why you are what you eat, or you are what you drink too,
Wow. Damn, that's good shit. And that's 100 ounces a day. That's very
Yeah.
hydrated. You probably feel good, perform good. It affects your mental clarity.
Mhm.
Like,
Because your water is, I believe, like 50%, maybe not 50%, but it's half fat and half water.
your brain.
Your brain, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is like humans are basically plants with emotions. Like we all need water and sun.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
And Roman, I want to, so what you said about talking into your water, and you're like, I know it sounds crazy, you know, so let me just say that's a new concept for me, but I understand people can have a reaction and being like, oh, that's not scientific, or like, where's the research on that, or that just sounds crazy and they minimize it. I just want to share something that's really helped me be a little bit more open-minded on these things. You know, one thing that I picked up on the last book I read, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, he talks about how he has seen the power of some of these things that people do that they swear by. And it's like, it doesn't even matter if it's scientific or not. Kind of like the placebo effect, it can have real effects on people. And he's seen that specifically in the music industry, and these artists who will have their, whether, you know, whatever their thing is and how powerful that is to them, some of these things can have valid effects. And that's just that part of it, you know, whether to say, you know, and that doesn't even go into just because we haven't measured it yet or have a lack of understanding of how to measure some of these things doesn't mean that there still can't be something there, because we don't know how to measure spirituality.
Yeah, you know what the crazy thing is? That there is actually scientific facts to back it up. So I forgot what scientists did it, but they did this experiment where they put water and they froze it, but first they spoke into the water. So like the first experiment was they spoke "I love you" into the water, and they froze it, and then with like a microscope they looked into the ice cubes, and you can see like clear snowflakes, like crystallized nice patterns of snowflakes. And then when they like said "I hate you" or talked bad up to it, the water, and then froze it and put it under the microscope, it was like all disorientated and shit. So
Whoa.
yeah, like it's really powerful. Like
That's,
a lot more powerful than we think. So
I know you can talk to, I think there's also studies on talking to plants.
Talking to
You
plants,
can talk
yeah,
to
that's
plants.
what I'm familiar with. And and people will hire people to come in and just talk to them. For some people that take, you know,
Just come in and talk your shit.
yeah,
On my house plants.
yeah, people really so.
that's why affirmations and all that work, because like they're literally talking to yourself, your body, your cells are literally picking all that up, you know, like every thought.
And what's interesting with water is there's the distinction, because plants are like an organism. They reproduce.
Yeah.
Water doesn't have that property of trying to survive, which is a definition of if it's alive or not. In philosophy and science, there are right now competing theories on, is all energy, is everything have some form of consciousness to it, versus is it just things that have the property of trying to keep it alive. The example is, if you look at like a fire, for example, a fire won't try to like stop itself from being put out. It's just gonna burn. Whereas like a plant will be resilient and try to survive. So that was the definition, one definition I've heard of where the line draws for consciousness of not. But there still is that question in the air is, you know, all things, there still is the possibility of all things energy still having some form of oneness that we all share.
Not to get off topic.
The great off topic, great
Yeah,
detour,
seriously.
very scenic detour. Next chapter is Check the Ego. Here's a quote from it. Implementing extreme ownership requires checking your ego and operating with a high degree of humility.
Ego is huge. Everyone has one, unless you've leveled up to the point that you don't. As I've tried to grow more into a leader, even something simple like the men's group. It's like, if someone has a great idea, it's like, hell yes, let's do it. You know, or it's like, Roman, come teach us about some breath work one day. You know, it's like, it doesn't have to be me.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
I started like always, oh, I'm the leader, I'm doing everything. You know, so I think you do have to check your ego and have some humility.
I picked up on, I just want to show gratitude for that. I felt that.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you,
the
man.
first day, yeah, meeting all you guys. I remember we were like all talking, and I observe a lot. So like even if I'm quiet or talking, like I'm always observing stuff. And I realized like CT was, even though he started it, he was probably the one that talked the least in that group that day, which was great because it's an example of a leader. And also that's why like I respect it, and that's why I also like yesterday I texted you like I had to come to you first, and then
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
if you want to talk to the group about it, great. And
Yeah,
I didn't want to
appreciate
be like taking over, you know, because I respected that in you. So that's dope. Yeah. Constantly checking my ego. That's kind of why I have this. It's kind of like a protection, like a placebo protection to me. So like as long as I'm wearing this, I know I'm protected, but it's also a reminder of the yin and yang, you know, like balancing out my ego and my higher self, you know, because if you have too much of your higher self, it could be like too much, you know. But also too much ego is awful. So just balancing it out, you know, like I used to think like confidence was thinking you're the baddest motherfucker in the room, you know, but it's confidence isn't that. It's confidence is like walking into the room and not even needing to compare yourself to everyone else. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's where confidence.
Yeah, there's a quote in here that says, the cockiest or the loudest, yeah, those people are often the first ones to fail. And so there's definitely a sense of false confidence, and how it plays out is those are the first people to fold. And the people that are the loudest in the rooms are often the ones that are the most insecure and fail the quickest, is what Jocko says in his book.
Yeah, that's a good point, Roman, just to reinforce that of that balance. Like the ego does protect us a lot.
Yeah.
And the ego does have a purpose. So I know some people say like, oh, I want to kill the ego, I want to not have an ego, but that's a really good point. There's balance.
I want to pick up on this point though, balance. Let me do this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good topics.
I look good.
Strictly good topics. We looking good?
Yeah, we're looking great.
Cool, man.
Dude, I'm so sorry.
Hitting them legs.
Yeah, dude, I did another one of those park workouts yesterday. I'll tell you guys about it after.
Hey.
Thank you. It was the hardest one I've done. This point of balance, I want to stay here. I'm actually going to skip ahead to the last chapter of the book, which is the dichotomy of leadership.
Yes.
And this is one of the most the most value add parts of the book that I've found. This part is all about the balance required to be a good leader. And there's almost like a poem in here. It's the first time this is kind of it. So here's the dichotomy of leadership. A good leader must be confident but not cocky, courageous but not foolhardy, competitive but a gracious leader, attentive to details but not obsessed by them, strong but have endurance, a leader and follower, humble, not passive, aggressive, not overbearing, quiet, not silent, calm, but not robotic, logical, but not devoid of emotions, close with the troops, but not so close that one becomes more important than another, or more important than the good of the team, not so close that they forget who is in charge, able to execute extreme ownership while exercising decentralized command. A good leader has nothing to prove, but everything to prove.
I like that.
It's heavy.
Has nothing to prove, but everything to prove. That's something that, man, I feel like I need like a good hour to think about that, because I see myself saying the same thing. Like when I'm, for example, in jiu-jitsu and I'm rolling around, I'll just say a lot like, man, I have nothing to prove when it comes to, doing anything that could risk injury. I'm like, man, I have nothing to prove, but at the same time, the reason I'm showing up is because I have everything to prove.
Yeah.
Like, it's so true. I don't really know I'm still grasping that concept.
Yeah, same.
But and maybe what that is not conflating your self-ego with the importance of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I have nothing to prove for who I am, but I have everything to prove for how important this mission is. And maybe that's where that line is. But
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of jiu-jitsu. Like, I have nothing to prove with my sparring partner. I don't need to hurt him.
Yes.
I don't need to
Yes.
hurt myself. But I have everything to prove by sharpening this skill. Because if it comes time that I actually need to use it, I have everything to prove.
it's like there's nothing more important.
Right. But in this controlled environment, I have nothing to prove. I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Roman? Like, how do you interpret? I have everything to prove, but I have nothing to prove.
I have everything to prove to myself, but I don't have everything to prove to everyone else. You know,
Well, that's good.
like
Yeah, we just cracked the code. We're
We'll always crack the code.
yeah. So
That's another great facet.
I guess just to prove to that little boy, the little scared boy that I was growing up,
yeah.
like I got everything proved to him. You know, that you can do everything that you dreamed of, and everyone that tried to put you down is no longer in your life. So those those statements were never true to start with. So to just believe in my own self and to know that I'm doing this for me and not for anyone else.
I want to connect this actually to where I was going to go next. So if I was to go to, so the book's broken up into 3 parts, but so now we're on part 2. It's called The Laws of Combat. This is chapter 5. The lesson is cover and move. They talk about cover and move being such an important aspect in terms of physical combat, but they actually take that aspect for what it takes to be a good leader outside of combat. This chapter is written by Leif Babin, and they're absolutely in shambles. They're in this horrible situation. And basically, they start to retreat. They start to get overtaken by the enemy. And there's no good option, but Leif has to choose between the least of the bad options, which I think is an interesting point of that story. And so he ends up choosing the least of bad options, and they make it back. No one's hurt. But they get back, and the commanding officer that Leif reports to as a leader is like, okay, you guys made it, but why didn't you call in this backup plan that you had? And Leif is like, I didn't even think of that. I was so in the moment, overwhelmed with choosing the right option. I was so zoomed in that I forgot some of these other options. And the concept I want to focus on here, so he talks about cover and move, about using your team to help you so that you can focus on bigger and creative things, and how that can help you zoom out. I want to focus on the importance of zooming out, because it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day operations of what you're doing that, man, I'm just trying to make it to the end of the workday, where you could forget why you're even doing this, and so zooming out as a tool to kind of maybe refocus your efforts and really think, is this something I really want to do? Do you guys ever zoom out? What role does zooming out have in your life?
For me, it's observing. That's why I take the time in the morning to like observe my day, you know, like observe myself from a different point of view, who I want to be, how I want to act. I feel like it helps a lot, because starting off your day, if you could just go into that state and just picture yourself how you'll be acting and moving and walking and breathing and expressing yourself, you come out a different person than when you went into the meditation, you know what I mean? So it's like observing yourself from a different perspective helps a lot. Like, it's crazy how much it helps, because like you said, you get so caught up in the moment, you forget all the other little things, you know. And like, I'm recently just starting to understand that I do need other people around myself, you know. I had that mentality back in the day, like, I don't need anyone. Who needs friends, right? Like, I'm a lone wolf, I'm got all this. But you know, if you admit to yourself, like, it gets lonely, and you gotta accept that you do need help sometimes, and that you gotta build a brotherhood with people that got your back no matter what. So yeah, that's the importance to me of zooming out.
And just quickly, I want to say that strategy of viewing yourself from a third-party perspective is actually a strategy used by the Navy SEALs. What I've heard of a tactic to get through Hell Week. Specifically, that was from David Goggins, like one of the most famous Navy SEALs, who's known for just being a beast. He says he reflected that when he was in Hell Week, when he was in the cold water, you know, people are just dropping like flies. Like, they're there, people are getting out and ringing the bell, which means you quit. And how he got through that was viewing himself. He said he would detach from himself, and he would put himself with the leaders that are like with the instructors of Hell Week. And he would be like mentally with them, like wrapped up in a blanket, cozy with a cup of coffee, watching these dudes cold. And he'd put himself from their perspective and be like, you know, I want to be someone who sticks through this, and I want to be someone who shows that mental fortitude and toughness. And him being able to mentally detach in those moments, of the hardest moments of his life, is how he's able to get through those.
I think this tactic of stepping back and evaluating and strategizing is really important. It's something I've had to learn as I've become an entrepreneur as well. I think we've talked about before, like in the workplace, you might have the tendency to become like a good lieutenant, carry out all your boss's orders really well, execute, get things done. And that's something I've had to learn again as a business owner. Like, okay, I'm executing shit day to day, but I also occasionally have to take a step back and say, what's the long-term plan? Where are we going? Do I need to reevaluate? And doing that in your personal life is really good as well. You know, whether it's like we said earlier, I'm cold showering every morning. This is starting to fuck me up. Let me reevaluate the plan.
Zooming out for me. Zooming out in the past 3-4 months. 4 months ago, I was kind of stagnant in life. I wasn't like, I knew I was doing things good, but things started to get a little boring. So I totally zoomed out. It was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I trying to achieve? And it was actually at that moment I stopped making TikToks at the time. I didn't really necessarily like what I was doing on TikTok. I started doing cold showers. I started doing jujitsu. And so, man, that zoom out really did have a large impact on my life. Now, I just want to say I wasn't able to do that without creating the space. So I had to cut off a lot of things that didn't fit me anymore. So that was a big part of that too.
Yeah, inventory checks. Like, what am I doing?
An inventory check.
Yeah. Like, where am I going?
What machine am I feeding? Because that's the big thing is like something that really stood out to me. Mr. Beast, one of the biggest YouTubers. Do you know Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
You know Mr. Beast? Yeah. He was just saying like he noticed because I mean, man, he's like top of his field, and it's like, well, what separates him? He said he had the realization that like he was looking around, and everyone was just like working to just live in a bigger box, meaning like everyone meaning everyone was just trying to get a bigger house. Like everyone's just trying to own a property, settle down with their golden retriever and their partner, and just and own that house. And he was like, I don't care about what box I live in, as long as I have a toilet and food, like I'm good to go. And so for him, that was how he was like, and same thing with like what car you're gonna drive, and then hearing it from him was important because it's like, okay, that's true. Like, yeah, I can be successful in my parents' eyes and in everyone's eyes, and I have a nice house, a nice family, but that to me, like, I want to be able to go one step further for why I'm waking up in the morning.
Totally. That's got to be lacking in like 90% of people.
Yeah, you feel that way too?
Yeah,
I feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, about a year ago, I sold my 370. So I had a Nissan 370Z, and this was
It was like a hatchback, I think.
yeah. So it's when I first started learning about spirituality and manifestation and how I can attract things I want. And at the time, it was like, oh, all I want is this car. My energy was going toward that car, and I thought this was gonna make me feel a certain way, and it did. Like everything makes you feel a certain way for a period of time, but then once that feeling goes away, it's like, it's kind of not what I expected, And so that's kind of what I got with the car. It made me happy and everything because I genuinely just love driving different kinds of cars. It's not necessarily for the looks or for the reaction; it's just for the experience. But then, about a year ago, I tapped into like my spirit. And it like, when you tap into your spirit, you realize that you have everything you need. You were born whole. That you don't need anything else besides the inner self. And going into that, I came out really feeling like I had everything. Like I don't need the money. I don't need all that. And so like I ended up selling my car because I realized it was a big financial mistake at the time. I was like, no, I don't need this car right now. I can get something cheaper and still feel cool in it. Like feel badass driving it and everything. I don't need the specific car.
Wow.
But yeah, I just remember like 2 years prior to that, it was like all I wanted. And then now it's like when you tap into your spirit, you realize you don't lack anything ever.
Yeah.
That it's just the society conditioning to always want more, to always want the next school, to always want the next house. So,
man, dude, my car is a money pit. I had to put new tires on it for like $700 a couple days ago. Man. You're making me rethink, like, what do I really need? Yeah, like you said,
like you can
the car that I have.
You can be happy with just a cheaper car, or even like just something that like fits your style. I want personally, I just want something that's fast and a little modified, but I don't need that glamour yet.
Yes.
Because I do want to experience all that Lambos and all the new GTRs and all that, but at this moment in my life, I don't need it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's easy. I think our environment has a huge effect on the way we think about that. And I noticed that when I was traveling in Latin America extensively, that I started to give less of a shit about material things and having nice things. And so when I got back to the US, I was like, first off, every car looks really nice here. Like after being there, bro, after riding in the '01 Honda Civic with 4 donut tires on it for like the whole time. Yeah. Every car is fucking really nice here. So when I got back, I was like, I'm not going to spend much money on a car at all. Like, I can, whatever. But as I've been back for a few months, I've really noticed myself. I've caught myself. I'm seeing all these Porsches, seeing all these Cadillacs, Maseratis, and I'm noticing that I'm like, man, I need that. Like I need that.
Right.
You know, like
yeah. Imagine you just see yourself
yeah,
driving
exactly.
that, you're like, oh.
So our environment really does have a big effect, I think, on the way we think about that. And you know, being in a big U.S. city, you're gonna have a lot of people showing money, you know, material signaling through their cars and townhomes and stuff. So it's easy to fall victim to that.
Yeah, and like you said you were in Latin America, and I mean, I've had the fortune to be able to go to Mexico and back like almost every year since I was a little kid. So just growing up in that environment, you know, one moment you're eating luxury here, and then the other moment you're eating like tortillas and beans at one place, and you're showering with buckets, and you're different. You're living a different lifestyle. You know, it really humbles you. It's really cool perspective to live both lives. You know,
Yeah.
like I want all the luxuries, but not just because of society, but it's because I know I can have it. You know, it's because I know I can experience this, and I want to experience it. I want to experience the good and the bad. You know.
Yeah. I think it's very beneficial to go somewhere like that occasionally.
Yeah.
Shower with buckets, you know, walk on the dirt roads. There's like street dogs chasing you, like, you know, all the cars are from like 1998. Like, I think it's really valuable
It really
to
is.
get into that environment.
I agree. And if you haven't done that ever, I mean, it's such it could really flip your world upside down when
It's
you
a real
realize
shell shock.
that you've been spending a lot of time, shell shock. You've been spending a lot of time on something artificial. If you didn't realize that you have it all, I mean, man, that's something I'm just coming to terms with. I feel like I've been trying to slow down in life a little bit. And just if you do that, there's just some people I'm like, man, I wish you could, you know, zoom out and have that perspective. But to do that, it would take them having to realize like, oh, I've spent the last 10 years of my life in the wrong. And luckily, I haven't been that far in the hole, at least from my understanding. And I could see that being really hard. I don't know if I would be able to come to grips with that. So I just have empathy for, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people, like I said, don't understand their why, but
Find your why.
find your why. That's the gist.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I don't think there's anything wrong with someone wanting to just live, just exist with a happy life with a family and kids in a house. Nothing wrong with that, but just make sure you're okay with that. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
So-
Some people want that.
Yeah. So we have about 8 minutes left. One of my favorite lessons, it's called Simple. It's just one of my favorite learnings. I love simplicity. I love minimalism. I mean, there's probably a theme of it with even just the setting we're in today and how powerful that is. But he talks about how, I mean, they in the SEALs, your combat missions are some of the most complex things. If you're trying to save a hostage, I mean, there's 100 moving parts. But they've had to learn to be able to explain the mission very simply. So the lowest common denominator, someone who's brand new can understand the mission. They said for them, practically that looked like going from 70 PowerPoint slides for every mission brief or to, 3 or 4 slides, drastic changes in the simplicity. They say simplify as much as possible, crucial to success.
Yeah. I think especially in like maybe your workplace, for example, Kenny, where there's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of like engineer type people. I used to work in the same environment. I think people are tempted to be very complex, like whether it's just to flex their intelligence or because they really are like making a detailed plan.
Or like maybe just to find something just because they have nothing better to do.
Could be, right?
If you don't have something to go home, if that's all your being is, I get it.
Yeah. Make it super complex and super detailed and super awesome. But I think, Jocko makes the point there. It's like simplify, cut out, waste, be able to explain it very directly and concisely.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you give me too many instructions, I'm going to be like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep it simple for me, man.
So something I got to work on too. Okay, so I'm going to move to the last chapter of the book. It's called Discipline Equals Freedom. There is something counterintuitive that discipline equals freedom. I think to me that's a concept that is newer to me. When I looked at people that did the same thing every day, I used to look at it like, man, these people are like robots. What he says is that discipline, having routines and processes, gives you the time to have more freedom. So he says, our freedom to operate and maneuver has increased substantially through discipline procedures. Discipline equals freedom. And he talks about discipline also allows for creativity. So there is something about being, because you think creativity and you think being robotic, those are almost opposing words. But if you have discipline and like what you have to get done, it just gives you more space to be creative. Think about the bigger picture. Give an example that he says in this book. And this is actually, before I even read this book, I've heard about Jocko Willink. Maybe I heard about him like a year ago. I'll never forget, he has this video where he talks about like waking up to the alarm is the first battle of the day. And that video stuck with me. He says, how you respond to that sets the pace for the day. He regurgitates, he says that in this book. So here's what he says. He says, discipline starts every day when the first alarm clock goes off in the morning. I say first alarm clock because I have 3, so he has 3. But he says it all comes down to that decisive moment. The moment the alarm goes off, it's the first test. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. The test is not a complex one. And I just love how he says, leadership it's not complex, it's simple, but it's not easy. So he says, it's not a complex one. When the alarm goes off, do you get up out of bed or do you lie there in comfort and fall back asleep? If you have the discipline to get out of bed, you win, you pass the test. If you are mentally weak from that moment, you will let the weakness keep you in bed, you fail. Though it seems small, the weakness translates to a more significant decision. But if you exercise discipline, that too translates to more elements in your life. I'll just say that for better or for worse, maybe it's a curse, but every morning I think of that and I'm like, here's my first test of winning that first battle. And I get up as soon as my alarm goes off.
Yeah, that's very similar. I was thinking about this recently because it's very similar to what Bedros Keuilian says on his podcast, and it's wake up early and start stacking wins. And he's like, focus on the small wins first, like getting up on the first alarm, that's a win.
Yeah.
Getting into the cold shower, that's a win.
Huge win.
Like getting your coffee going, getting your laptop open, knocking off 3 things off your to-do list, that's a huge win.
I'm on a winning streak, baby.
It's
Yeah, that's the dub streak.
Yeah,
That's the dub streak.
all I'm taking is dubs.
Wow.
And he said that translates into bigger decisions, into bigger wins. He's like, don't sleep on the small wins. That's what's gonna let you get the big ones. So yeah, that's huge. It's
like that lead that's how I said cold. I've been doing cold water first thing in the mornings. To me, it's that lead domino that you get that one, man. It's knocking over every other domino. Because if not, oh my god. Because once you're in the cold water, you're breathing. You're like, all right, well, yeah. It's just I know that if I didn't do that, I could see myself laying in bed another 30 minutes, maybe scrolling on my phone. Let's see what what content's for me to
It checks your ego definitely the first thing in the morning. That's why like I started doing it, because like, all right, when you wake up, it's like your mind is telling you don't go into the cold shower, don't go into the cold. And so like when you win that battle with your mind, the first thing in the morning, it's like, all right, I already beat you, I can do everything else,
Yes, I think that goes back to one of the first points you made about the definition of a leader being similar to the definition of a man. And I've been doing a lot of thinking recently about this idea of impulse control, like men having impulse control, leaders as well, and men having discipline, leaders as well. And so like you mentioned social media, like that's a huge win. In the morning, if you don't get on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is in the morning and just start scrolling, that's a huge win. So yeah, like, again, waking up on the first alarm, getting in the cold water, not scrolling, getting your shit done.
It's the simplest thing.
Wins.
Simplest thing.
Yeah, but yeah, impulse control, and like instead of saying like, oh man, I really want that extra piece of cake, or oh man, I really want to open some, Instagram right now, or oh man, I really want to, whatever.
It seems so inconsequential in the moment.
Right.
And I think that's what's hard.
Yeah.
You see over time how consequential it was. The butterfly effect.
Yeah.
I have my favorite quote by one of my favorite artists, Nipsey Hussle. He has this quote that says, instead of trying to build a brick wall, lay a brick every day, and eventually you'll look up and you'll have a wall. So it's just about those little steps, and then turn into the big picture.
Yeah. I think Nipsey, I like Nipsey as well. I think he has some quote about taking a step back to take 2 forward, or I took 5 steps back to take 10 forward. Like not scrolling social media or something, or not checking your phone when you're trying to work. Maybe that's not the best example, but it's like, I'm kind of taking a step back. I want to, but whatever. But you're taking so many steps forward in doing that. So this idea of impulse control, discipline, stacking the wins, early on. And the brick by brick idea of like the little things really add up to something big.
Yeah,
Huge.
and like tying back to the book, Extreme Ownership, he also says, how did the fudge? It was so he says, oh, ownership is everything. Own your mind, mind your own. I love that. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
Own your mind, mind your own.
Yeah. And maybe that's one thing that's another example of these small things translating into big things. If you take ownership of everything in your environment, you might become the owner of the business, of the house,
Yeah.
of the car, you know, all the things, whatever you want to do. So, yeah, I think these little things can't be slept on. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people fall victim to losing these little things. They're taking little L's when they wake up, you know, like they're hitting snooze. That's a little L. First thing they do is grab their phone, open Instagram. That's a little L.
Yeah.
Cold shower? Nah, not today. That's a little L. And that just accumulates, and then you're taking big L's
Yeah.
in your business or in your relationship or whatever.
In life, without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That being said, we're at time. And so, yeah, cheers to stacking wins, getting the dub. Roman CT, I appreciate you guys coming on today.
Absolutely, man.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you both to Stacking Wins.
To Stacking Wins Extreme
Stacking
Ownership.
Wins.
There it is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you.